Today we're going to be taking a look at this video that says New Zealand is addicted to low-skilled immigration workers. Obviously, there's been many debates about whether or not these immigration workers is good for the economy itself. Some have argued that a lot of these migrational workers have taken over a lot of the jobs that could be there for the locals. For example, a lot of the potential hospitality jobs, a lot of the retail jobs, and a lot of the seasonal worker jobs.
We've all heard the headlines about Kiwis headed overseas for a better life, usually across the ditch. But what about the people who move to New Zealand? They help fill jobs like teaching and nursing while at the same time contributing to our economy. At least that's what we thought. The Reserve Bank now says much of our immigration is temporary. Overseas workers here for a short time and sending their paychecks back home.
So I used to work in the bank, and there's always tons and tons of workers, especially from Southeast Asia countries, that come here and do Western Union transfers to send their money back home to their family and relatives and all that. You get tons and tons of those every single week. So it's definitely a big, significant thing that's happening.
Is that good for our country and our economy? For his perspective, we spoke with economist and editor of the Kaka, Bernard Hickey, and I asked him, if these migrants are staying but not spending, are we really getting a good deal?
Well, we're certainly getting the work, and it's certainly helping to stop lots of wage inflation. So if you're a business, you're happy that your wage inflation isn't taking off. But there are other effects, particularly around rents.
So the first thing that these immigrant workers do is obviously they stop the wages keep on going up for the business itself, which means that businesses can afford to pay these workers pretty much close to as low as they can afford. So essentially businesses are making more money by not having to pay their workers more.
People have to live here and pay for a rent or bunk down with someone else. So there's extra pressure on the rental part of the market. Now, if they're not here permanently, it's unlikely they're going to buy a home. So that may not increase house prices. So there's swings and roundabouts on the inflation side of things.
Especially within the last 2 years or so, there has been a lot of people that's looking to come over to New Zealand, and there's been a significant increase in demand for a lot of the rental properties. So whereas before a rental property might be significantly easier to find, but with more people coming into the country itself, a lot of the rents have just gone up significantly.
So presumably this sort of migration is putting pressure on some of the same services residents or citizens use, like signing up to the doctor or enrolling their kids in school.
That's right. Although it is complicated if you're only on a temporary work visa because you don't have the same access to hospital services, and it's going to be more difficult if you want to get kids into school. And of course, for a lot of those people who have come here, they've only come here by themselves. They haven't come with their families. So, and then there's an interesting period where the assumption is they're going to go home before the 3 years is up.
A lot of times the workers, especially again from Southeast Asia, do come by themselves, and then they take on these really, really long and quite difficult working hours and conditions, or to earn money to send back to their families back home. And a lot of them don't really plan on sticking around for the long term.
Not everyone does. Many apply for permanent residency, and then once they have that, then they can add to demand for housing, and then they can look to go to hospitals and start to have families and lives, and that starts to put extra pressure on our infrastructure.
Ultimately, probably a lot of them would like to bring their whole family over to New Zealand if that is indeed possible. But again, at this current stage, especially within the last couple of years, immigration has been reasonably tricky for people that wants to actually get into New Zealand. So New Zealand's actually slowing down a lot of the immigration process so that it's a lot harder or just more difficult for people to be able to actually immigrate into New Zealand.
I want to talk about them staying on in a minute, but can we talk about what you just mentioned? Have you got any idea how much money they're sending overseas that they're earning here but they're not spending here?
That's a great question, which the Reserve Bank is going to do more research on, along with other parts of the migration puzzle, because we really don't know exactly how it affects inflation and demand for goods and services, because it sort of depends on what the situation is when those migrants arrive, what type of migrants they are. Are they here for the long term or the short term? Are they here on their own, or have they come with families? And these are the things which means that sometimes you can have a migration surge which is inflationary, and then sometimes you can have an inflation surge which is deflationary.
I'm surprised the Reserve Bank itself hasn't really done much of a study on how much people are actually sending overseas.
And this one, the Reserve Bank's not quite sure of yet.
How come? How come we haven't been measuring this?
It's a good question.
Attempts to do it, and the assumption in the past was that a migration surge would add to inflation.
To be fair, this might not be one of the easiest things to actually be able to measure, since a lot of people that are in this position of sending a lot of money back overseas isn't exactly the people that are usually targeted through surveys or questionnaires.
But then we had a migration surge and inflation was quite low, particularly from 2017 to 2020. And that was clear then that a lot of that migration was temporary migration, and it was putting downward pressure on wages. So the problem is it's a moving feast, not just the migration, but the economy itself. So you could have a migration surge hit an economy and it turn inflationary if the economy is stretched to the limit. Whereas if the migration surge hits when the economy's in the doldrums, it may not have an inflationary effect. So it is difficult for the Reserve Bank to work out. It's worth highlighting that sometimes a migration surge can actually depress wages, particularly if you get a lot of people in here on relatively low-skilled jobs.
So is this good migration for us at the moment, and is it making our economy more productive and more highly skilled?
So basically they're saying that just because a lot of people are migrating into the country doesn't mean that wages will be increasing. Again, it's just repeating the same thing, that a lot of people that come here doing relatively low-skilled work means that businesses can allow them to pay these people less.
Migration is a many-edged sword in which it's fantastic if you're a small business and you don't want to invest a lot of money in new capital to be able to use machines to do your work, and it's actually cheaper just to employ more people to add to your production. It's also fantastic if you've managed to wangle a way to pay these people below minimum wage, or to get them to work for 50 hours instead of the 20 hours that you're actually paying them for. Now, the bigger issue, though, is that we've become addicted to low-skilled migration.
That is actually something that's quite significant, and it has definitely been happening. A lot of people that come here for migration work end up working a very, very extended amount of time while getting paid a relatively low amount compared to what normal New Zealanders would have got. Now, they're still getting paid much more than whichever countries that they were from, because if it wasn't any better, like, why would they even come here to do the work? But they still end up getting exploited by some of the businesses here as well.
It is the best way to grow your business without having to invest, and that leaves you spare cash to invest in other much more profitable ways to invest. And in New Zealand, that means anything that involves some land, a mortgage, and then just waiting for house prices and land prices to rise.
This is the extremely sad thing, and is one of the things that I really, really hate about the economy here. So basically, what are you saying is that for a small business, The business is just trying to extract as much as they can by paying the workers as little as they can and extract as much as they can in terms of profit from the small business, and then taking their money to simply buy land, whether it be residential or other forms of mortgage, other forms of property investments. And that is the real way that people make money in this country. They don't try to grow their business. They don't try to scale up their business. They don't try to create significantly more amount of jobs. They take this money that they make and they go buy land. And then they sit on it, waiting for the price for the land or the houses to appreciate. And that's how they actually earn money. Not from the business, although you have to use the business to start, to get some form of capital, but you buy land. And I find that extremely sad.
We do see overseas, cases like the United States where there becomes this idea, this resentment of migration or of migrants. They're taking all our jobs, they're coming here and taking opportunities that I want. Do you think we would see that with this sort of migration in New Zealand?
Well, that's the other thing. It's pitting the people that could potentially want jobs here. It's pitting them against people that come from overseas that work here and they just want to give their family a better life back home, wherever they're from. It's literally pitting these two groups of people against one another, which they shouldn't really be the problem. They are not the problem.
That becomes more of an issue when you have high unemployment, but for a long time we haven't had that. The different issue in New Zealand is not so much they're coming here and taking our jobs, it's they're coming here and taking our rental property and they're pushing up rents, and if they stay here then they're pushing up house prices. It actually highlights an enormous double standard where New Zealanders have this feeling that we are welcoming, that we are open, and that we are very cosmopolitan in the way we view the world, when actually we have become the Dubai of the South Pacific, where we enable substantial migrant exploitation, and in fact large chunks of our economy depend on migrant exploitation.
See, this is definitely true. Small businesses entice a lot of migrant workers to take up jobs, and these businesses end up paying a lot of these workers not a particular high amount, but they still want to stay because they still earn more, which drives up the rental prices, house prices, which creates resentment against a lot of people that come here to look for a better life.
Being able to pay well below minimum wages, to have people working way longer than they say they are, and a lack of checks by our under-resourced health and safety and work standards bureaucrats means that a lot of these cases are missed. This is the dirty little secret of our economy, that we have come to rely on exploiting a group of people to keep our business model going. And that business model is don't invest in your business, put all your money into residential land, and that's where the real money is.
Yeah, basically the man said it. A lot of business philosophy is don't invest in your business, buy land, sit on land, make money. Extremely sad.